Look at what's happened at Harvard. You know, I mean, one of the things that's happened there, and the Asians, of course, are the wild card in this whole enterprise, because the affirmative action policies in the U.S. hypothetically were set up, at least in part, to bring minority, so-called minority, it's not like Asians are a minority, but to bring minority people
access
up the
to university.
Sure, but it turns out that if you use unbiased selection processes, then you overselect for Asians. So you overselect for Asians and Jews. It's like, oh my God.
Which is why they're now discovering that Harvard's had to come up with these techniques to try to downgrade Asians, such as downgrading them on personality.
Well, and the funny thing too is it's not that they're downgrading them on personality, because they don't use objective personality measures, which they could use. Because one of the things that's really cool about the Big Five, especially measures of conscientiousness, is measures of conscientiousness do not produce ethnic differences. So one of the ways of putting together a selection battery that's objective, let's say, which would mean both blind to peripheral characteristics such as race, but also capable of predicting the desired outcomes. So that's what I mean by objective, is to produce a battery of tests that blends cognitive assessment with genuine personality assessment. And actually, it's so interesting, because in the American context, you're actually bound to do that by law if you're selecting employees, because you're bound to use the most valid and reliable current method of selection. That's instantiated into law. And the American Psychological Association has stated firmly that the proper way to do that is to use a balance of cognitive tests and personality tests. But virtually no one does that for all sorts of extremely complicated and absurd reasons. But then you might say, well, we can't use the cognitive tests because they produce ethnic differences, and you can moderate that by interleaving personality, which is one way of dealing with it. We're going to use something else. It's like, okay, you're going to use something else. Well, it turns out that whatever else you use is more biased than the thing you're fleeing from. And that's what's manifesting itself at Harvard. Well, we'll use our subjective judgment. And, you know, the Harvard people have been hand-waving about the fact that their bloody admission criteria are so sophisticated that you can't capture them with mere quantitative analysis.
This is their latest one after trying to just make sure nobody had access to what they were actually doing.
That's right. We're so sophisticated that we couldn't possibly quantify it. It's like, that's not sophisticated. That's prejudice.
At every single stage, Harvard University in this case, Asian students have brought, at every single stage, they've done everything they can to cover over the actual fact that they are themselves being biased on ethnic reasons in their selection.
Well,
it's an extraordinary sight.
Sure, and so what's happening is that, you know, wherever subjectivity is allowed to enter into the equation, the Asians are downgraded as a consequence of personality, which isn't personality. It's actually the subjective sense that the evaluators produce when they read through the applications and they know that the applicant is Asian.
And it wasn't even, without even meeting the applicant. Judging the person on racial characteristics without having met them.
Yes, and there's a variety of things that are appalling about that. And one of them, of course, is the denial of the opportunity to attend a top-tier university like Harvard for the students who were qualified to attend, the Asian students. But there's another element to this that's also equally pernicious, and in some sense more self-serving. Like, if you set up your society properly, and this is the equality of opportunity doctrine, it's in everyone's best interest to exploit the talented maximally, right? Because in every domain of productive endeavor, a small proportion of people do most of the productive work. And so you want to take advantage of those people, those 1 in 1,000 people or 1 in 10,000 people who are mathematically gifted, for example, or gifted in whatever way they happen to be gifted. And so if you don't select your top-tier candidates, so let's say the Asian students in the case of Harvard, then society doesn't get a chance to exploit them properly, and everyone ends up poorer. Apart from the fact that each individual doesn't get their opportunity, there's a social cost here too that's not trivial. And then, of course, the other issue is that the criteria are seen to be inequitable, because they actually are. And that produces terrible amount of cynicism about the institutions themselves. So the horror of objective testing is that it's biased.
Yes.
And that the more profound horror is that no matter what you replace it with something that's even more biased. So it's like, well, good luck thinking your way out of that conundrum.